Hey, what's up guys? So today we are going to take a look at localization. We are going to build a localization system inside of Unity. Do keep in mind that this is not a very robust localization system. It's meant more of a small, easy localization system that you can write on your own for smaller games, especially indie ones, with lots of text and yeah. So let's take a look at how we can add this. So as you can see here, this is a small sample scene that I have, and up top we have the displacement, which basically just measures the amount of distance that we traveled from the spawn point. And as you can see, this is a dynamic text, as in it keeps on changing. Even the displacement text is dynamic, as you can see. In the code I will see in a bit, the displacement text is added. Okay, so let's take a look at how the translation works. So here we have the locals manager, and this is responsible for all the translation needs. So far I only have two languages that I've translated to, which is French and Spanish. And here, if I were to just right click and click on text, this basically just translate the whole game to French. As you can see, this has been translated. And if I were to write Spanish here, for instance, and I click on translate again, it just translate. And I don't actually have an English translation, given that our texts are already in English. So whenever you try to translate it into a language that is not available, it will just revert back to the default language that you had it set up. As you can see here, could not find language ENG, so no translators available. And this is using JSON. So as you can see here is the JSON file. You have the language name and then the translation for each word. Obviously you could write a small tool, or we perhaps can make it more dynamic in a future episode. I'll definitely take a look into that. But as you can see here, it's quite simple as well, but it can be cumbersome to write a lot of words. So let's take a look at how we can set up this in terms of code. So before that, again, this is the localization manager, and inside of the capsule manager I really don't have much. It's basically just your text that you already have, and then just a variable to store the localized label. So let's take a look at the coding side of things. So here is the localization manager script. As you can see here, we have a delegate called register for localization. This basically allows us to encode register for the event that is called whenever the language changes. This allows you to add dynamic translation to your app. So when the user selects a new language, it automatically translates the whole app or everything that is registered to this event. And then we have a singleton pattern for the localization manager, as well as the variables that we saw earlier, namely one for the localization directory, one for the actual localization database, as well as the file entries that we have. And here on awake, we just initializes the variables, creates the directory if it does not exist, and then we just initialize the location files database with all the entries that we have. So for all of the files, localization files, that we have. And then we just have two testing methods, one for testing a language change, another one is to translate a word or sentence. Next up, we have the change language method. This takes in a language and cache the current language if there exists, and then we find the localization for the language requested. If it does not exist, we tell you that it does not exist. We replace the current localization with default, and then we just call the event registered for localization. And if it does exist, we load it, we cache it, and then we just call the event. And then here is the void translate, takes the original word, and then just try and see if there is a localization available. If there is no translators available, we return the original word itself. So this way you don't actually have to create a translation file for the language that you are currently developing in. And if there is one, it just translates the word. and then there is a method to get the full path of the files, and then we have a class called the localization file entry. This contains a language and then the file path, a very simple one, and then a constructor that takes in the file path, allocates it, and then just read the localization. So it just takes the content of the path, which is JSON, and then converts it to an object to get the language, and then just stores the language. And here is the read localization, which returns the object based on the file path. And then we actually have the database, localization database. Again, we have the string language, we have the different translations available, and then we've got a cache. The constructor allows us to define the language as well as all the translations. And we have the word translation clause, which contains the original word and the translated one, as you can see, as well as the get translation method that takes in the original word, check for cache. If cache is empty, just caches the whole thing, and then we just find the index. If it's available, we return the translated word, else we just return the original word, and cache just clears the cache. And right here you might notice that I have a cache. This might seem counterintuitive because we're already storing it in an array. Why do we have another list called cache? We could just access it here. Well, the reason for that is because we have just take a look here, find index. It's easier for you to do it with lists rather than arrays, and for searching as well, lists is usually faster than arrays, but you could use a for each loop inside of the array to get the current translated word. That also would work, but for now we have two methods called cache and uncache. Cache just takes all of the translation arrays and just caches it into this list, and uncache just defaults the list to free up memory. And to finish, this is the script that is responsible for the actual displacement. Everything is quite normal here. The only thing that we actually need to see right now is the subscription of the on-language switch for the register for localization event, as well as how we are translating the text. So here we are just overwriting the localized label using localization.instance.translate, and then we are just feeding in the original text, and then it translates it for us. And then on update, we just use the localized label with the distance to display it. And then yeah, so that's about it. And something else that I forgot to mention is that once you actually do create the code, you'll get a new directory here in the actual persistent data path. This will contain the locals folder. This is where you'll place all of the different translation files that you have. So for instance, if you have a team or someone that's creating the translation for you, then you can just drag and drop them in here. All right. Obviously, you could change the file path to be somewhere else. You could use also how it's called, the streaming asset folder, which would be a slightly different implementation than what I have right now. But for the sake of this video, I'm just storing it inside of the persistent data path. Obviously, depending on your use case, it might change. And yeah, so that's about it for this video. And if you enjoyed today's video, then be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you have not already. If you've got any questions, queries, or perhaps any recommendations for me, please be sure to leave them in the comment section down below. And yeah, so I'll see you guys next one. Bye.